Kia ora tātou. I'll declare this meeting of the Central Otago District Council open. Welcome you all here today and thank you for your attendance. Firstly, we have Councillor Cooney. Somebody move that be accepted. Thank you, Tamer. Seconded by Stephen. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We move to our public forum now, and first on public forum is Bess Carbine from Salvation Army, Pam Hughes from Central Otago Budgeting Services, and Sandra Shelton from Combined Churches Food Banks. So way down at the end there, unfortunately, the distance is due to the 1 metre distancing. You can take your face masks off if you're comfortable, which will allow us to hear you a lot easier. So welcome, the floor is yours. We also have Councillor Calvert on the R2D2 thing in the middle here, so she's teamed in, she can hear you as well. But nice loud voices. Welcome, Bess.
Sandra.
Sandra starting? Right.
Yep. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity to do a little talk about what we do and what we encounter. First about myself, I'm Sandra Schouten. I have been a volunteer with the Salvation Army for 5 or 6 years. Then I was also just a volunteer for the food bank. Since 4 months now, I'm actually the coordinator from the Combined Churches Food Bank. So I really enjoy it. I really like it. And I would like to tell you some more about the food bank. Yep. Who can apply for food parcels? Well, everybody can apply for food parcels. There are a lot of people at the moment who are in need, and everybody can go to an agency and say, well, listen, this is my situation and I really need some help. How do we get our stuff into the food bank? How do we get our supplies? Well, we have an awesome community here in Alexandra. A lot of people who have a surplus of items, for example, hunters who have a surplus of meat, beekeepers who have a surplus of honey, people who have orchards and have a surplus of fruit. That all gets donated to us. People who do donations, money-wise. We have the supermarkets, the Foursquare, the New World. When they have things that are getting nearly out of date or surplus items of any kind, damaged stock, that's all stuff we get. Trends, they give us their surplus items. We have with the Salvation Army a special program set up with the countdown. People can do donations, and instead of that we get those donations straight away, the countdown makes that into a list that's available to us, and we can take out those oranges or those bananas or those wheat bix whenever we need them. So that's a very, very handy scheme. We have volunteers that put up market stalls and sell surplus of, for example, fruit. And from all the money they get from that, that will be donated into our food bank. So we can use that money for items we need. The churches, of course, we are a Combined Churches Food Bank. The churches all do their bit and put in food parcels in the food bank, what we can distribute amongst people who need it. A big thing is our own garden from the Salvation Army. We grow our own veggies, and that all comes into food parcels and in our veggie cook on the morning. We have about 9 volunteers who put in all their hours every week. Then we have 3 other volunteers who are there to call on when we need them. So that combined makes that we have 50 hours a week that's put in by volunteers to keep the food bank running. And when it comes to the need, unfortunately, there is a very big need. To give you an example, we put out 2 food parcels every day of the year. So of course, some days are more and other days are less, but take it in average 2 food parcels every day of the year. For people who need it, and unfortunately that's only going up. More and more people need us. So how, like in the food bank, how we, how do you say that? What we see at the moment is that all the stuff that we get in is not enough. We have to buy the basics in ourselves, like we have to buy flour. We have to buy bread, we have to buy sugar, just to keep it all running. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say about the food bank.
Thank you. Who's next?
Yeah, please.
Best.
Kia ora koutou, ko Bess Tapuingo, my name's Bess, and for te ope whakaroa te mahi, I work at the Salvation Army. My role is I'm the Community Ministry Coordinator, and therefore I oversee most of what's running from the Salvation Army. So the Community Ministries not only provide the necessities of basic needs like food, clothing, and emergency accommodation, but our programs also address needs like the loneliness, the transport, the visits to hospitals, maybe even schools. And there's a lot of advocacy work to be done because those that we do see are, I don't like this word, but this is what we're seeing, broken, you know, really affected by and we even try our best to encourage those to look for work, and half the time too, or a lot of the time, they don't have transport or they're not allowed to drive. So there's a lot of mahi or work to be arranged to see how we can get them to their mahi to work. And we refer lots to budget advice, financial mentor, and work together with them so that we can provide a good, cohesive work with our clients. And they do well with that. One of our most popular programs, Positive Lifestyle Program, the PLP. And this is all about self-awareness and self-development. I'm really passionate about this. I get those referred to the program instructed by court, Diversion, other agencies, Work and Income, and they can self-refer as well. It's all about the participant understanding their behaviour and how they can change that. The community garden is managed by Brian and his team, and we work in partnership with corrections who refer their client to us to do their community hours, and also then they might get involved with the Positive Lifestyle Program. So in mid-January to approximately mid-May, we do have the weekly 2-hour veggie coupon program, which is delegated to Sandra, and agencies can refer their clients to that. as well as Salvation Army, of course, and they can select fresh vegetables harvested only that morning. 17 varieties to 21 we've had in the past, except for this year, because of the rain we've had and the warm weather. A lot of vegetables were ready before Christmas. So at the moment we've got 17 varieties, and when the apples or the peaches, I think, nectarines are ready, that's when I'll go out to the orchards and pick some boxes up to bring back a bit of veg coupon. With this vegetable program, we have had feedback from clients who have informed us that because they have selected the vegetables and the fruit available that morning, they can go to the doctors, or they can save up the money to go towards firewood. Or I even had a young man say, oh, I'm so happy now I can go and get formula for my baby. And at the end of the year, we have a team of volunteers that put the Christmas hampers together. This year we had Christmas hampers together. This year there were 142 people assisted. That's probably a lot less than what we've provided in the past. So that roughly kind of would be around about 50 families. So again, we have had to buy a lot in for the Christmas hampers, but you know, our community was so grateful for the kindness of the community who have donated and contributed towards our Christmas hampers. That's a big help for us. I would like to talk about addictions and to not minimize the fact that it is around us big time. And I am responsible for addictions, and it is affecting our community and our wider community big time. We need to be real about this. So again, there are agencies that have programs out there, but there is still something missing. And I do believe, and it might be personal for me because of what I'm seeing, is that our parents, our families, they need to be educated, you know, about the problems of alcohol especially. And what's happening in our Roku? Homelessness, couch hopping, sleeping in cars, and at times by the river, and gathering information from other networks. I have been informed there are 9 people living or renting a 2-bedroom house. And I want to say there are 2 babies in this house. This is not ideal, but it's so hard to find somewhere, or even if it's just a little, they can stay. It may not be ideal, but it's something for them. Now this also with this Stefano, they have to move in a week's time. So because the property's on the market, young mother with a newborn released from maternity was expecting to board with a relative, and then when she was discharged from hospital, found out that the relative was given notice to move out again because of the house going on the market. So what's going to happen to that young mum and her baby? So yeah, there is this happening. You know, it is expensive living in Alexandra. The rent's high, or there's nowhere to rent. That's what we're seeing.
Just got to keep an eye on the time, sorry.
Oh, okay. So I just want to say no data, in a photo. Thank you.
And Pam.
Morning, everybody. I'm Pam from Central Otago Budgeting Services. I'm the Office Manager Coordinator. We cover Central Otago, which goes from Maniatoto through to Queenstown, Wanaka, Race Junction and anywhere in between. I have a staff of 4, which includes me. We're all part-timers. Currently, we're working from home, but we still do visit clients if need be, but a lot of our work we can do by phone and by internet. A lot of the work that we're seeing is, once upon a time, it used to be debt, which was our credit card debt was the major thing. Now it's circumstance, and it could be, or actually before Christmas, we were receiving 1 referral a week with people who are having health conditions, which was cancer. And so far this year, we've only been back to the 3rd week, we're seeing referrals with people who have had cancer and their circumstances have changed. They've either lost income, they've lost their job, and all that kind of thing. Work and income, bless their cotton socks, have made it so that anybody who needs to get on the system, you have to register through the internet. A lot of people are not computer savvy, or if you're stressed, they find they struggle with getting on. So we're actually taking on the role of some of those organisations. We're helping support people to get onto the system. A lot of people think that they don't qualify for help, which is like some accommodation support. So we're doing a financial room fitness to make sure they're getting everything they're entitled to. A lot of people don't know about the council rates rebate. They think, oh no, we don't qualify. But in some cases they do. In some cases they get the full amount back and they're surprised that they actually get it, and they could have got it a few years beforehand. But elderly people, which is another increase for us, we're helping people get into the residential care applications, because the application forms themselves, it's a booklet that they've got to work through, and they're distressed about having to go into a home. So we're helping support them in going and, you know, doing the applications, making sure they've got everything that they need for those applications. We're finding that our clients are, some of them have got that much debt and their income is low. They're having to do bankruptcies. So once again, we're supporting them through that. We also educate clients as well. So we'll talk to choices. We will go to, after last COVID, Cotton Hogan invited us out there to talk to their staff. We had over 200 staff, which they were doing a welfare check for their staff. And we talked on different things like your working for families, housing accommodation, because a lot of them have had their income drop right back to 40 hours when they were used to having a high income. So all in all, we're not just a budget service. We are an education service, we're an advocate service. Another one of our roles is the housing coordinator for Central Otago. And we are not finding people, but we're advising people on how they can access getting support by getting into Housing New Zealand, which is working through working income and then being referred through to Claim Aura. A lot of people don't realise that there are Housing New Zealand homes here in Alexandra. Okay, some of them have been knocked out of account now, but there's still a few extras still here. People don't realise if they register that they want to stay in Alexandra, that shows that there's a need. People don't realise that Housing New Zealand homes here, so they're saying their closest point of call is either Dunedin or Invercargill. So once again, if the referrals are going through, but they're not showing that there's a need here, then Housing New Zealand's going to say there's no need, get rid of the houses. We have actually quite a bit of power behind our name because we're part of a bigger organisation. We knew that there was a house being sold through Housing New Zealand. We spoke to Jackie Dean, who was the MP at the time for this area. We were able to stop that sale of that house going through and managed to get somebody that was living in a camping ground put into that home. Currently, we have some families that we're working with for an emergency accommodation. We have one young girl who, for various reasons, is in the emergency accommodation. We can't keep her there, but she can't go back home. So if anybody, I told Tim I was going to ask her anything, if anybody knows anybody who would like to take on a boarder until we get this young girl sorted, we desperately need somewhere to place her. So just flick me an email and we can make it happen. So currently victim support is paying for that accommodation for her. As part of my role, I have quite a few fingers and quite a few pies. I'm the treasurer for the food bank, the community pantries here, and a lot of the stuff that we're having to buy is things like bread, shampoos and soaps, things like that to make up the food parcels. So we also connect with a lot of different agencies. So we've got the Food Pantry, Salvation Army, Victim Support, Family Care, Catholic Social Services. So we work in relationship with a lot of people. We work closely with Work and Income too, and also in our revenues. Some work for the corrections, and as part of the guys' community service, they break down the big bags of food from treats, and so that then comes back into the food bank. So it's a real community, environment that we're making one way or another. We're supporting each organisation. So yeah, last year we worked with 628 clients. That was our financial year. This year we look like we're tracking along the same lines. An idea of the need that we're seeing. Some of our clients are long term, some are one-offs, but yeah, we've been stable. We've been around for 30 years here in Central Otago. We're funded at the moment by Central Lakes Trust as our main funder. We're not funded by the government, although we did just get $10,000 from the Ministry of Women's Affairs to support us. But most of our funding is coming from.
Questions to the ladies' councillors?
Yeah, I've got one, Your Worship, just in relation to the food bank operations. How far geographically do you go for providing services?
I know that we provide Alexandra, Cromwell, Roxborough, we go Omakau,
way down to Ray's Guns, Edricks and Ross, yeah, Ranfurly.
Okay, cool. So the whole Central Otago. Yeah, okay.
Lisa, I just wondered what the wait lists for addiction services are looking like at the moment for this area.
Our bridge program in Dunedin, there's been a 4 to 6 weeks wait, but it's getting there too through the red tape CAS, the referral to the Gavin, and then that goes to CAS, and then it comes back, it gets assessed, and yeah, it's just not good enough.
Finlay.
I was just wondering, you said that people are referred to for food parcels and things by agency. Can people self-refer if they're different?
Everybody's assessed who comes to the Salvation Army.
So they can come on their own.
So yeah, every person can come up and then they come and we will get them straight away what they need. But then Beth would like to have a talk with them and see what is it actually, what situation are they in and how can we help them? Yeah.
Because there's usually something else as well.
Yeah.
So they need to be referred.
Yeah. We never do just hand out a food parcel. It's like, it's the complete package. So if you need a food parcel, there's probably a reason why you need a food parcel.
Yeah.
So we look at like, how can we solve all these issues instead of just handing out food? We try to solve the whole. Yeah.
Tracy.
It sounds like you mentioned that there was 9 people and 4. It doesn't sound like a really big group. So, and I can imagine people have multiple roles in this. So do you all look for people for volunteers for more things, or how does that work? Do people come to you, or
All of it, as well as we are registered with volunteer. Yeah. So I have, I see on my emails this morning that there is somebody wanting to volunteer at a family school. So, and I processed it and handed over where I need to. Yeah. So people can self-report.
For budget advice, all our advisors are trained. So, and a lot of people want to volunteer, but they don't want to do the training. They just want to rock up and say, right, I'll be a bunch of guys. But there is a process that they have to go through. They are trained and then they are supervised with clients. So there's I'd say 12 months would get you before you are fully independent. But our team works in such a way as I might be working with a client and I've got an issue. So we do it as a team. We work together. We're lucky. We have got a very, very good team. So we're not doing it independently. We work together. And so our oldest one is our newest member, but she's finished through training just now. So there's no age. Life skills are probably a bonus when it comes to being a bachelor advisor. So yeah. So if anybody would like to be interested in being on the committee or being a volunteer, you're always welcome.
When talking about the food bank, people will get training if necessary. One of the volunteers is sitting on the other side of the table.
That's good fun. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We probably need to press on, but that's a good insight into a side of life that often is overlooked, unfortunately. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Excellent.
If anybody wants to have like my details or whatever, if you know somebody who can contribute, I will leave some business cards here.
Brilliant. Thank you.
What about that?
Thank you.
Happy to.
Now we have Wayne Dixon from the Cromwell Equestrian Club. Welcome, Wayne.
Thank you. Good morning.
I was just explaining we have to have you down the far end due to COVID, but you're most welcome to take your mask off. If you're comfortable.
I'll be very pleased to do that.
Right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I just hand you out a bit of paper that you don't need?
Wayne will do that for
You
you.
just don't need this, right? Don't need to look at it yet. You can just pass it around and I'll refer to it later.
Right.
So good morning, everybody. As the Mayor has said, I'm Wayne Dixon. I'm President of the Central Lakes Equestrian Club. And we administer the 90-odd hectares of the Cromwell Racecourse Reserve on your behalf and for the people of Cromwell and the wider district. So thanks for the opportunity of being here. I'm here to discuss the proposed licence to occupy 7.3 hectares of the Cromwell aerodrome. It's slightly complex, so that's why I've handed that bit of paper out. I'll refer to that halfway through my discussion here. I'll try and be concise because I realise you've got a big day coming up. But as I said, I'm here to discuss the proposed changes to our licence to occupy and the council decision to charge our committee $525 plus GST for the right to do that. This was outlined to us in a letter following the council decision in September 2021. Prior to this, actually the community board had wanted us to mow all the runways in return for grazing the 7-odd hectares. And we had deleted that from the lease and returned it. The council staff, I think at that stage, realised that it wasn't the community board's decision to manage that lease, it was actually a council decision because of the aerodrome. So they referred it back to the council with the recommendation that we lease that 7.3 hectares and in return pay $525 to do so. This lease issue has been going on since 2020. From the outset, as a club, we've made a range of approaches to the council, stating why initially we weren't prepared to mow the airstrips, and latterly why we're not prepared to change condition of paying that rental. We've written a number of letters, we've had personal contact and with telephone. Nothing's been resolved. So after the latest meeting that I had with the property and services manager, he suggested that I come along, talk to council and try and sort it out. That's what I'm doing. So that sheet that I've handed out actually outlines the historical background around the licence to occupy part of the Cromwell aerodrome. The question is administered the Cromwell Racecourse Reserve under a management document since the year 2000. At the same time as the management document was developed, signed, we were given a license to occupy at that stage the 27 hectares of the adjacent aerodrome. The idea being that we would use it for grazing. And in return for this at that time, we undertook to mow the airstrip. It was determined that we could no longer graze sheep on the runway. It was a health and safety issue, and we understood that totally. So the council at that time offered to reduce the amount of land that we could graze down to 11.6 hectares on condition that we fence it off from the airstrip. And as you see on that bit of paper I've given you, I'm tracking down through the history of it. So we did that, we fenced it off at our cost of $10,000, and we put in 1 kilometre of fencing, which fenced off an area that wasn't used for the aerodrome, but was part of the aerodrome reserve. We maintained that 11 odd hectares, and from 14, the mowing of the airstrip was taken over by the council contractors. Central Lakes Equestrian have not mown the airstrip since 2014, and it was never intended from that time on that we did. Now we fast forward through to 2021. The aerodrome area that was available for grazing was reduced further. It was taken back down to 7.3 hectares, and some of you may recall that was for the hangar expansion along Ward Road. So again, as far as we were concerned, that was fine. But what happened at that point was the conditions of the original lease, I'm going back to the 2000 lease, were somehow carried over, and the council employees had the expectation that we would mow the whole airstrip in return for grazing that 7 hectares, because that had been in the original lease. The whole thing got messy. So we just said, no, we're not doing it. Council then decided, or council staff, I guess, then decided that for that 7 hectares, we should actually pay something for it. So they got a valuer to come in to value what that 7 hectares of land was worth in their view. And they came back with an idea that it was worth $525 plus GST. Many again said, well, we're not really paying that. We're quite happy to do what we've done in the past, which is to maintain it, look after it, graze it, water it if we need to, shoot rabbits on it, but we don't see that we should have to pay the $525 fee that some valuer has come up with. So basically, that's the situation that we've got to. The land runs adjacent to the main highway. We've spent $10,000 fencing that off in good faith in 2014. From that period right through to 2021, the council was happy with us grazing it, looking after it, shooting rabbits on it, and maintaining it. Now suddenly we've been faced with this idea that we should be paying some fee for it. We operate as a group of volunteers managing this reserve on your behalf. We're not there with any particular vested interest. I think in 20 years we've made huge strides in terms of what's happened there and how much it's used by the community. But we seem to have got to this impasse at the moment where there's an expectation that we should be paying to lease this land. So this is where we're at. So we're not going to do it. I guess if the council wanted to carry on, you're not going to lease it to someone else because it's landlocked. There's no water there. There's no shelter there. Stock could only be from the main highway because we've got stud rams in the other part of it we're grazing. So the whole thing's just got really messy. That's where we're at.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions before I open the floor. How many members of the organisation are there?
Central Lakes Equestrian?
Yeah.
About 8.
Right, and what's the benefit of being a member? What do you get?
We don't get anything. We get the opportunity to administer the 90 hectares of the racecourse reserve for the people of Cromwell.
So you don't have your horses on it or they're grazing or anything like that?
We're a group of volunteers that administer that reserve for you.
Do you
For the
get, you
council?
get nothing out of it other than
No.
some work?
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions, councillors?
Yes.
So the part that you just, just so I'm clear in my head, so the part you're talking about is the part adjacent right in between the runway and the road?
Yeah, it's a wee bit messy. If you think of the main road going
Yeah.
past, right, and so the main runway
Yeah.
runs parallel to that road.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, there's more
Because it's a racetrack.
Yeah, there's an area on the other side of the airstrip between that and the racetrack
Okay,
that is still part of the aerodrome reserve, but
so
they
that's the
don't
bit
need,
you're talking
they
about?
don't need it for the aerodrome.
So that's the bit you're
That's
talking
the
about?
bit, it's a landlocked bit, we've
Yeah.
fenced on the aerodrome side, on the, you know, we're fenced between the aerodrome and the
And the racetrack,
racetrack.
okay, that's,
And it's that strip of land in there.
and are you, so there is people with grazing their horses?
Yeah, we've got someone who grazes.
And do you charge them for
Yes, we
grazing?
charge them. So we, you know, we generate something like $80,000 or $90,000 a year from activities that take place on the Cromwell Racecourse Reserve. Of that, all that money goes back into developing amenities, and making it available to the people of Cromwell and the wider district. You know, people go past there and think that it's a racetrack. Income from racing is probably 15,000 of the 80 or 90,000. So it's not even 15%. 15% of the income that's generated from that reserve comes from racing. The rest of it comes from grazing, equestrian activities, music festivals, and so on. So the local people know that, or local councillors know that surely. So a huge amount of activity goes on there. National pony championships, dog agility trials, you know, just a stack of activities.
Got councillor Calvert being represented in the middle there, and I can't see her question, but Rebecca can.
Shirley, do you want to, I think it's been answered.
Right,
It was about the income, what income.
we've got that.
Yeah.
Is that satisfactory, Shirley?
You're
Yes.
muted, Shirley.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Neil, you had a question.
Yeah, so Wayne, in effect, what you're telling the council is that despite the fact we've got a professional valuation that says it's worth $525 a year, the club's saying, well, we're not going to pay it. The reality is, it's not going to get anybody else to use it, so you might as well just have it for nothing like we do for the rest of the racecourse reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not saying we have.
But to get the return to reinvest back into the racecourse.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the council wanted to dig their toes in and say, no, you're not getting it, then it would have to be fair. It wouldn't make any difference to our income because our farmer, our grazer is very good at it, and we've got 90 hectares
Yep.
here, and he's got a number of stud rams, so it wouldn't make much difference to him, to be honest. It would just mean, it would just place a further burden on the council, because it would be an area of the aerodrome that you would have to maintain and mow and look after that's not being used.
And what you're effectively saying is that $525 is income that otherwise wouldn't go back into the racecourse reserve.
That's correct. And it would be 10% of what our grazer pays.
So can I just take that one step further? The logic you could take, if we're going to charge for the, I know the airport airdrome reserve is different than the racecourse reserve, but if you're going to charge for the airdrome reserve, why aren't we charging for the racecourse reserve?
And your question, I suppose, has to be asked, what is the cost to council to maintain it to the standard which the Equestrian group have already doing currently?
Anyone use that reserve? I'm not from Cromwell. Like if people want to ride their horses or
Absolutely.
exercise their dogs, do they need your permission or can they just go and use it?
Dogs issues are a little bit difficult because we've got a lot of horses there. But yes, they can. They certainly, people ride the horses through there. It's available to the public.
Yeah, so people want to walk or ride bikes or.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When the 7.2 hectares is produces income, but it's not discrete. It's not.
No.
It's not. It's part
Just
of the
part of
larger
the total
group.
package. The grazer pays to graze. we've got 90 hectares of the racecourse reserve and another 7 now of aerodrome reserve. If that's not there, it's not going to make any difference. So I don't know how that valuation is. I don't know how the valuation was generated really. If it's generated on someone from outside using it, then I can't see anybody paying that. They can't do it.
Right, food for thought. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate you coming down and appreciate your time. There'll be some further discussions at some stage over that. Right, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. That brings us now to confirmation of our minutes of our last meeting, which was 8th of December, a long time ago. Any problems with any of those folks? Somebody who was there wishes to move that they're trying to correct record. Thank you, Tamer. Seconded Nigel. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to be vigilant to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as a member and any private or other external interest they might have. Update your register through the governance secretary as need be, and step away from any matters that may cause issues today. Right, planning and regulatory. Mr. Deputy Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. So agenda item 22.1.2 is the approval of the Vincent Spatial Plan. You got a sidekick coming? A couple of sidekicks. Well, it's only Edward. Yeah.
Okay.
You can take your mask off and then we can actually hear you. But you can leave mine if you want to. But so yeah, we've got a report before us about the adopting the Vincent Spatial Plan. So Anne, I'll get you and the team take us through that report, and then we'll receive it, and then we'll have a good discussion and decide whether we're going to adopt the recommendation or not.
Thank you, everyone. As you're aware, the Vincent Spatial Plan, will hopefully aware that started in March 2020. So we're almost 2 years in. And during that time, we've undertaken a significant amount of engagement and consultation with the community, drop-ins, facilitated workshops, and key stakeholder engagement. The plan is looking to provide a 30-year I guess, projection of what we think things could look like in 30 years' time. 30 years is pretty standard measure nowadays. We used to do planning cycles on a 10-year cycle, but usually by the time you got to the end of the 10-year cycle in a district plan context, you were out of land and you were always chasing the tail. So with this particular plan, we are looking at 30 years with the hope that we will have enough land development opportunities available for the community for the next 30 years. And once we've got a bit of a slideshow that we'll go through, and we'll explain the yield inputs through that as well. So the 30-year plan gives us the opportunity to, for both private developers and for council and other agencies, to think about investment going forward. For example, for CODC, around infrastructure planning. So we need to think really carefully about where this goes and can we, where particular development sites go and can we service them, and what's the best way of doing that. So this allows that. The growth that we're with the sort of overriding thing is to provide for growth in a way that protects our environment, but also provides for the social, economic and cultural needs of the community. The main issues of focus for us have been around affordability and availability of land, but at the same time protecting productive land around their house beyond the urban areas. So I'll introduce you to the team. On my left here, we've got Tim Church from Bothamiscal. He's an urban designer, which I think most of you will be familiar with. He's done a little bit of work with council in the past. Edward Guy, I'm sure you're all familiar with Edward. Edward and his team at Rationale have provided us with a lot of economic data and growth projections and all kinds of things, and facilitated ILM workshops and a variety of other things. So I'll hand it over to Tim. Paul is also here. Paul will at some point talk about the engagement process and sort of the community lesson that they've told us.
Right. Kia ora koutou, everybody. I'm Tim Church from Bothamiscal and have been partnering with Edward and Rationale team on that. I think it's been a fantastic team effort. Just to sort of say that at the outset, combined between the various consultancies and working with the council's team, which has been a pleasure, and there's been a number of touch points with the community, which has been really rewarding actually to be part of. So that's great. I guess the purpose of today's presentation for me is really to just give you a walk through the document really, and the Vincent Spatial Plan document, and just give a really a brief overview of what it contains and how it's structured, and some of the outcomes of that document. So might just move to the first slide, please.
Sorry, you can't get the presentation view on. It's coming up on a different screen. I can't. So you just hopefully.
Are we able to do full screen?
Where do I do
yeah, just push that button.
This button?
Next one.
No, that it is, but it's not coming up on my screen.
Okay, right, that's fine.
Sorry.
We'll just work with that then. So really the way that the document is structured is we're wanting to, I guess the first part of it, the first introduction, if you like, is to set the scene, just provide some background, and I'll take you through each one of these sections. But the introduction is really just about setting the scene, providing some background to the plan, and some, I guess, definitions and things about what spatial planning is and what we're trying to achieve. The next section outlines the spatial plans themselves, and we were quite keen to get that as early in the document as possible to outline the proposals for Alexandra and Clyde and Omakau and Ophir in their immediate context. And then the last part is basically an appendix just outlining a number of the processes and just providing an illustrative and graphic and description of the processes that we follow, primarily around the engagement case, the engagement we've had with the community and various stakeholders and partners out there. Next slide, please. So I thought it was just worthwhile just indicating the geographic scope that the team was provided with. So essentially, it's split over two geographical areas, obviously within the Vincent ward itself, although not encompassing the whole ward, obviously. So Alex and Clyde are the two sort of primary townships, with the Springvale and Ensklew sort of areas to the side, and then to either side of the Clutha River, and then Omakau and Ophir to the north. One of so there was sort of four primary spatial plan objectives, and there's so really the guidance that we got from the establishment report, which essentially set the brief for our work, and Ed can potentially talk about that in a second once we get to process. Is really to improve housing affordability and availability. That's really just recognising that there's quite a diverse or sort of growing diversity of need in the community, and obviously that need for, you know, the need for more affordable housing products. Then obviously, Alexandra and Clyde have actually been quite constrained in terms of some of the land available for development. So part of the objective was to provide improved availability of land and options for both residential and commercial sort of approaches. Then recognising that the context in which we're working is also offers some potentially quite usable, productive land as well. And so the idea was really to make sure that that was utilised and provide sort of opportunities for other economic activity other than house building and commercial and sort of retail type enterprise. And then increasing the town centre's vibrancy and investment was, there's multiple town centres and commercial nodes that we all know need some activation and vibrancy, and really the context of where they sit is important in that in delivering that. Even though within the brief itself, the town centres, particularly Alexandra and Clyde town centres, were not part of the spatial plan brief. So they're pretty much operating status quo at the moment. Next slide, please. So we wanted this to sit within a regional and cultural context, and we were very much aware of the world of difference and in Ngāi Tahu, the significance of this area to Ngāi Tahu. So up front in the document, it's very much outlining and setting that cultural and regional context early. And the idea is that Mana Whenua have reviewed and provided this some feedback on the document, and we've incorporated that. And we're just conscious that the regional identity is a really good, amazing asset for the ward and for the Vincent Spatial Plan area, that we really wanted some of those values trickling down into the outcomes and stuff. Next slide.
I'm lost in the wrong spot.
So what we wanted to emphasise is as part of going to the community, there are a number of other considerations, both in terms of a strategic context, so a number of policy documents, studies, sort of areas of existing development that, we're not starting from scratch here. We're really wanting to feed off existing material that's out there and existing direction that's out there. And then there's a lot of good practice, spatial planning that in terms of landscape and approaches to urban form and visitor, tourism and visitor considerations that are all worth taking note of. So this was really the technical side of things was really driven by a number of these aspects. And they're all articulated in the plan themselves. Next slide. So that really provided a starting point for a process that, as Anne indicated, has stretched over a couple of years since 2020. Edward and Rationale were part of preparing the establishment report, and as I said, that really provided the brief for us to then go and develop the spatial plan, and that indicated some of the sort of key objectives, I guess, and some of the processes that would need to be followed to achieve the outcome we're endorsing today. And then Paula's team, along with Rationale, looked at surveying the community, and so getting a real snapshot of some of those community values that already exist in the area. We then did some investment logic mapping, developing problem statements, which we'll talk about in a second, problem statements and KPIs and things with the stakeholder group that was actually held in this room. And that's really starting to, we'll talk about that in a second. We had a series of community drop-ins, we had been an all-day facilitated workshop with a number of representatives from the community. Several of you may have been there as well as part of that workshop, and that really helped to, I guess, establish some of the potential spatial plan options. So that was quite hands-on and interactive. We sought based on some of those draft options that were prepared, based on those workshops and some of the previous engagement, we then went out to the community and sought their opinion on those shortlisted options. We then, from that point, we then developed, we took that feedback on and developed a preferred option, if you like, and then checked in with the community again as to whether we'd hit the right mark for that preferred option, and then we finalised the plan itself and all the rationale and documentation behind that, which you now been sought to endorse. Next slide, please. So really, just as a summary, the process is really encapsulated by some really strong community engagement and touch points along the process at quite a number of different levels. So there's been really good feedback, I think, provided, and Paula might be able to jump in and talk to some of that in a second. As alongside those technical considerations and some of that strategic direction that's been provided through some of the analysis, some of the technical investigations, and some of that good practice stuff that we added in. So the idea is that comes up with the overall outcome of the spatial plans themselves. Paula, did you want to add anything to that process?
So just the last engagement piece we did with the community was just on those proposed spatial plans, and the question of did we get it right? Because we had the options, when the Let's Talk options match had gone out, there were quite a few changes, and we wanted to make sure we picked up with a lot of variety of comments. And so that process it occurred during the lockdown period, so we were basically online. We only got 144 responses on that, which is a lot less obviously than the other ones, which is not a surprise because we're going to pick up people who had an issue rather than people who thought okay. So of the 5-point scale of saying, whether they're satisfied, seriously very dissatisfied, over 50% of the respondents were very satisfied, like 4 to 5, and then between 76 and 84% were 3 through 5, so we're pretty happy with it. And the feedback was generally pretty positive. Some of the people that were concerned were related around specific areas where these properties were, which is not surprising. It also gave us a chance to look at those properties again and think, have we got it right? And again, the Clyde community picked up in the township, there's a couple of reserves that were missed on the maps, which was helpful. So that's some feedback that was really good, and we fed it through. People really like the greenway corridors. There's been some questions around the immunity buses, what that cost over private land, things like that we could just pull into our comments.
Thanks, Paul. I think, in general terms, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, and obviously been quite constructive in terms of being able to respond to some of those more detailed matters. So I think that's been good. Edward, I'm going to pass you on now just to talk through the ILM and some of the real critical issues driving change.
Yeah. So this is actually a page out of the spatial plan itself, and we've been through problems one before quite a lot of times, all around about housing affordability, availability, the lack of land. That's number 2. Number 3 is all around the impasse that residential activity and agricultural activity, the effects of those two things, right? So that came in really strongly in the ILM process. And then the last one was really around the town centre. Let's not do things that actually affect the town centre and actually diminish its vibrancy. So we've been through those, and they've stuck in the engagement we've done with the community has actually supported those problem statements as well. So they're problems 1 to 4. So it's really important when we look at the answer that we've come up with, that it actually does address those issues, right? And so the principal thing that you should be looking at is, has the spatial plan achieved the benefits on the right-hand side? right? So if you look at those, improved housing affordability and availability, meeting the needs of a diverse and productive community. So that's the benefit in the top right hand corner. So when you look at, and this is part of the problem with a lot of investments, is because this is an investment at the end of the day, is we do this problem analysis at the beginning, but we forget to come back around and say, did we actually solve those problems? And did we achieve the benefits that we wanted? And I think by the master plan or the spatial plan, it has got high density housing, for example. We've provided more land. We should see some ability for those house prices and availability to actually be remedied. So the next one, improved land availability. Yep, we've definitely achieved that. And when we go through the numbers and we look at what we're providing versus the projections, we've provided sufficient land for 30 years to meet growth needs as projected today. So I think that's important, right? So we can actually say, yes, we've achieved that benefit. Improving the protection and utilisation of productive land, soils and other economic activity. I think if you go back to how this Vincent was developing, we were actually getting a lot of housing being developed in the rural land, and it was causing, we were consuming our productive land, but also it was causing problems with reverse sensitivity, people growing cherries, people living on the edge of it. So through this, we can see that we have addressed that by actually tightening up on the rules and ensuring people can live in the rural area, but in a quite confined space. And I think the last one, really, when you look at the plan, it's we've had high density, medium density residential around Alexandra town centre, and we've also provided some medium density residential around the Clyde town centre as well. So those things should actually improve the vibrancy because people will be able to walk and cycle to the town centre. So when you look at the things, we've actually accommodated all those benefits. So all the time around with the
probably sort of interrelate, but really seeking out that what we actually try to achieve in the spatial plans really to identify those choices. So at the moment, we're probably more focused at the right condition of that spectrum, but those are some new opportunities in the housing in particular, which provides for different types of living environments, and obviously intensifies parts of the towns where they can then provide critical mass for reinvigorating some of these town centres as well. So the important, so I guess really that provides a continuum of housing opportunity across the spatial plan area, and obviously fitting different housing needs within that spectrum. Next slide, please. So those colours, just to be aware, those colours are being carried through into the actual spatial plan themselves, and this is the part of the Vincent spatial plan that applies to Alexandra and Clyde. Bearing in mind we've got two sort of areas of focus in the ward. So just some of the key discussion points really around this is really trying to achieve a balanced growth option, where we're looking to obviously intensify existing zoned areas, plus also providing for some additional greenfield growth. But the growth is largely within zoned areas that either have zoned areas for residential housing or zoned areas for rural residential activities. So again, within those zoned areas, we're looking to diversify the different housing typologies within that. So it's taking existing zoned areas, but actually breaking those into a finer grain of typologies. And as I stated, the medium density typologies in particular are really focused on infill of the older parts of Alexandra and Clyde. And that's where we see some of those older housing stock areas and obviously areas that are quite accessible and well serviced by the movement network, by open spaces, by community facilities, and can contribute to those town centres. And the other key point is really I guess trying to achieve some strong definition of that urban growth. Obviously, we already have a strong Clutha River, running down that southeastern or the western edge of the urban area, but looking to achieve an amenity area or some sort of amenity buffer that creates that landscape backdrop on the terraced embankments that the airport and some of that Springvale rural residential and productive land occupy that upper terrace. So really that starts to define that urban area quite clearly, and also the way that the different typologies and the different densities of residential and other land uses expand out from the town centre. So we still have a very distinctive definition of Alexandra and Clyde with some, I guess, some definition between the two towns. So you sort of are still able to keep that identity and that distinction there.
The shift in typology is most noticed in this Alexandra and Clyde area, because at the moment for residential we just have one zone, whereas this provides quite a mixture of typologies from the medium density, more intense, there's sort of normal low density residential, but also some large lot which we haven't had before, which we're confident there is a market for. So we're providing quite a variety of options, which is a shift for this more. Cromwell's got a lot more. Cromwell has a number of sort of different types of zones, large lots, and lots of not medium density. So, but this is quite a shift for Alexandra to provide such a range of typologies for people who flexible.
Yeah, it might be worth just going back to the housing typology slide just to make that point. I can show you so how, yeah, that next one then, that one there. So essentially the residential zone gets broken up or split into two, if you like, between medium density and low density residential. And the current rural residential zone gets split into large lot, rural residential and lifestyle. So it really just starts massaging those out a little bit more and creating a broader spectrum of housing choice.
And the smaller rural residential that's proposed between Alexandra and Clyde is the intention is for it to be reticulated so that we don't have waste and water on issues on that for the smaller lots, and that'd be distinctive from our what the list will go forward we will call rural lifestyle, which is more what we've currently got. That's 2 hectare and up area, which is what we've Lead Scully is an example of where we've left that. So we've already got some competing activities and some issues around the there's sensitivities occurring there. So
it's probably fair to say that quite a bit of the feedback that came through around the rural residential zone was really that people were struggling to manage and maintain some of those larger properties, and actually felt that they still wanted that sense of openness, but not have the extent of land that was currently provided for in that rural residential zone.
So we're hoping that providing for a 1 hectare, for example, or something along those lines, along with the large lot, might help people where we've got situations where people are moving into those productive rural areas to achieve that lifestyle of space.
So that continuum that is provided in that housing choice slide essentially radiates out from each of the centres. So that's the way that I guess good practice urban form tends to work. Next slide, please. Edward, I'll hand this over to you just to talk through some of the data behind this.
Obviously, we're looking at 2050, so we want to make sure we've zoned enough land or identified enough land to meet the future needs of the growing community. I've been around in this area for a while, and I remember when Alexandra had negative growth, and now we're in a totally different situation. And it's a real positive situation where we've got plenty of growth. So it is quite, and look, at this level, we want to, we're looking at 30 years and we don't want to do piles and piles of analysis. So we're actually just on high level numbers, but when Ian does her work in terms of getting plan changes over the line, it requires more detailed analysis. So this is kind of high level. We do have some problems with the data sets, and that's about how NZ view the world and how Central Otago District Council accumulate its numbers as well. So we've had to blend some information together to come up with some numbers. This map up here, the dotted lines are the areas that we're looking at, Opa, and then also around Alex and Clyde, the black dotted area. The actual coloured areas are the statistical areas, the Stats NZ. So obviously we're not sitting over those nice and tightly. And then you've also got the Vincent Ward, which is the pink line. So we've got quite a lot of different things to look at. If we look at the Alex, Clyde and Dunstan, if we look at that area, we've actually got 4 different statistical areas. We've got Alex, Clyde, Galloway and Earnscleugh. And what we've found is that a lot of the growth hasn't actually occurred in Clyde and Alex. It's occurred outside of those rural areas, outside of those urban areas. So the Moby colour, the brown colour is, what has it got there? It's Dunstan, isn't it? Dunstan, I can't read it, honestly, it's getting old. Dunstan Galloway. So the Dunstan Galloway is where we've actually seen a lot of the growth. And we have showed you in the past those from the housing stock Cape wheel that housing has been occurring. So it makes it quite hard, but so we just move to the next slide. What we have done is we've said, look, the whole Vincent Ward is going to grow by 50% basically. Yep, and then we've applied that, so if we move to the next one, and we've said, next one, yep. So what we're saying is, look, it's going to grow by 50% over 30 years based on the ward projection. The existing dwelling column there is from the rates database. So this is actually actual rateable properties. So we've said, right, okay, well, we're going to actually grow that by 50%, plus we're going to provide 15% of extra capacity. And that's where the 7770 comes from, right? So it's a quite a complicated narrative. And then we've actually looked, so the additional dwellings are the yields that the spatial plan are providing. So you can see there that by 2050, we've actually provided more than what's actually necessary, right? So it provides you with some level of comfort. Not all of the spatial plan will be rezoned at one time, correct? It will be a staged approach. So in 10 years' time, you can imagine doing this again and seeing how things have developed. All right, so
I'll take you through that in a second.
Yep, cool. But I suppose the key thing here is we have provided adequate supply, and hopefully that will actually remedy some of those problems that we identified in ILM.
We've taken the target that's up there is based on the growth projections, what we think we need. And the National Policy Statement for Urban Development Capacity suggests adding an additional 15%. So that's where we've landed, and then we're providing significantly more than that based on the yield we can get out of the spatial. So we're comfortable that we're in a strong place.
Next slide, please. So we're just going to drill down a little bit more into each of the component parts of the Alexandra and Clyde part of the spatial plan. And some of the key discussion points here are really around the town centre and how we support the character of that town centre by the proposal to expand the heritage precinct around that area, just to encapsulate some of the heritage buildings and some of the character within that core of the town centre where possible. And then radiating out just to the rest of the historic grid, if you like, is looking to infill that with medium density residential. So again, intensifying that, trying to sort of get that real vibrancy and intensification close to the town centre. And we're conscious that there's potential for for those to conflict, and we're working with Anne at the moment, and we'll talk to you a bit later around how we manage that. But this is very important through the implementation phase that the intensification and the medium density approach to that area next to the town centre is very carefully managed with character in mind. So we'll come back to you with that around some of the implementation of this. But that's been made very clear in the document, obviously. So near the Clyde, the rail trail head that we're looking to formalise some of the industrial activities that are happening there. So providing the opportunities for local employment and really just trying to cement that in there, or sort of a range of, and provide for activities that might not be otherwise available in Clyde itself. Or would only be available in Alexandria or Cromwell. So really just trying to provide some provision there for those commercial or employment type activities. And then beyond into Mutton Town, looking to expand with lower density development, really just trying to sort of continue and enhance some of the existing development that have happened there. So we have the opportunity, I guess, with some of the infrastructure, wastewater improvements and things to maximise some of that area, or some of the expansion of Clyde now, and actually do that in a way that can be managed carefully. Again, just coming back to the Waikirikiri river there, there's an opportunity, or Waikirikiri Creek, there's an opportunity to start defining Clyde as, through use of those topographical features, if you like, and then beyond that, looking for larger rural residential type developments. So within, on the northern side of Waikiri Creek, we're looking to infill and intensify even some of those existing rural residential areas with some really strong feedback that some those parts along the early part of Springvale Road there could actually be downsized and more manageable for people close to the town centre. Next slide, please. And similarly, there's a range of discussion points in Alexandra. Again, trying to work, there was the Long Centennial Avenue there. There was incremental creep of commercial and retail land expanding up along the out from the town centre. So the idea is to try and contain that and consolidate that as much as possible. But where there are greenfield opportunities, look to establish a more local convenience centre there out near the golf course and near some of that sort of greenfield land on the edge of town.
We've received, we intentionally haven't extended the commercial areas in Alexandra because we've received quite a bit of feedback about the amount of existing commercial that was not being utilised. So to begin with, we're hoping that by not providing any additional, that might help encourage people to come into those areas if that's the only areas available to them, because there is quite a lot of vacant property within the existing business.
And to support the town centre again, that first walkable catchment outside the town centre, providing that with zoning that for medium density housing typologies, which then within the existing grid, which then helps regenerate some of that older housing stock and having some of the community being very close and walkable distance to some of the really core community facilities in that area, schools and open spaces and the town centre and such. The other proposal is to potentially, to expand just a short distance along Manaherikia Road out towards Amakauanofa. Again, just providing, balancing the development on the southwest side of up on the hill there. So from industrial, we've got a large area of industrial land to the west, which is currently constrained in terms of heavy goods access. So there is a new heavy good access road there, which I'll talk about in a second in the movements slide. So next. So one of the, I guess, the real opportunities of the spatial plan is to start linking together and networking, a number of the open space, the really rich open space resources that we have here, both in terms of formal open space, but also informal recreation areas and trails and things together. And so the real opportunities for starting to acknowledge that we have the Clutha River, which provides a great sort of river frontage and a number of linear open spaces along it, but also the amenity area to the sort of northeast, if you like, which links up, which can potentially link up the terrace embankment through to the airport, so Manaherikia River through to the airport and Springvale area, and then with the rail trail piercing right through the middle, there's some really good existing resources there. So the idea is to try and establish some connections across the terrace. So starting to stitch up some of those green corridors, between the existing urban areas of Alexandra and those greenfield areas, and then the Waikiri Creek area as well, to get those sort of cross links happening. The amenity areas, as been discussed previously, was really, as Paula noted, that a lot of that is across private land. It's obviously steep and quite difficult, quite constrained in terms of development. So it does provide an opportunity to work with existing landowners including the council around the airport, is to work with them to enhance that backdrop to Alexandra in particular. And help define the expansion of those urban areas, so giving some sort of real containment to the towns and to the urban growth. Next slide. And then that open space is also complemented with extension of a number of the trails along the river, so bringing those through to connect with the town centre, bringing them across the corridor again, as I mentioned, to be complementary with those green links. So really trying to sort of stitch together those important open spaces. And it's important to note that we haven't done, other than providing the new link just near the Pine through to the existing industrial area, that heavy goods link. We feel that the existing roading pattern and the existing infrastructure provided, is pretty well accommodating of the growth that's been provided. And obviously there'll be new road networks and opportunities for comprehensive development in that greenfield area, which would incorporate new roads and new open space amenities. So the emphasis has been on this plan is really trying to promote other modes of travel, including pedestrian and walking, pedestrian and cycle access, with stitching up a range of existing cycle routes, extending cycle trails on either side of the Clutha Valley, and then bringing those the Clutha River, and then bringing those through and around the Alexandra town centre to again invigorate that and make that one of the key destinations in the region, in the district. Next slide, please. So you're asking how, and Ed mentioned this earlier, how these are potentially sequenced. And so some of the principles around sequencing is really trying to stretch them out across 3 distinct phases at the moment. Really, given, and I was talking about a 30-year planning horizon, we're looking at that sort of in roughly 10-year increments, but then the council has the ability through district plan reviews and other reviews to manage that and monitor that as we go through. So that might not necessarily break down into 10-year periods, but what we're trying to do is provide some principles around sequencing of that, so the council can manage the timeframes around that.
And a lot of the reasoning behind this is around our ability to actually service it in terms of infrastructure. We need to be really careful that we don't release land that we can't service for obvious reasons with the infrastructure.
Yeah, so in that respect, a lot of the first phases of the sequencing is really infill and utilisation of that existing infrastructure that the towns or the council already provides and that already exists in the town. So and part of that is trying to achieve a good balance between regeneration and expansion of existing town of the towns. So we're trying to create a bit of tension here that actually developers and those looking to develop in the area are actually able to providing some sort of incentive really and ability to develop early and without just sort of going through into the greenfield areas, which tend to be sort of easier approaches to that. So try and manage that carefully. And then with greenfield growth, just evenly released, as I say, over that 3-phase period. It also acknowledges that there are some private plan changes and other proposals that are out there already, so we've captured those in that sequencing diagram as well. Next. So now we move to the Omakau and Ofa part of the Vincent Spatial Plan, and again, obviously, this is to the north. So we're really looking I mean, obviously, Omakau and Ophir are constrained to a certain extent by some of the infrastructure, water availability, and managing some of those infrastructure constraints. And obviously, that's being worked through at the moment, but will take time, obviously. The primary direction of retail growth has been defined towards the rail trail. So really just starting to fill that last part of the town centre in and being able to attract and utilise the opportunities that the rail trail provides. The Department of Conservation own some land which is currently zoned industrial. The idea is to is that becomes another green open space resource, which would, I think, remain under Department of Conservation ownership.
There's an area there that DOC wouldn't be interested in getting developed in terms of what's there, what's been there previously. So the green area reflects the area that they're wanting to retain, as they've told us at the moment. But there's still more discussions to be had with council like that. The purple area is an area that they currently lease out, and that's an area that they're open to a discussion.
Just a bit hard to read. Can I just check if that race was working?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so on that point, there's the primary focus of residential housing expansion is opportunities is to that northern edge along Racecourse Road, which again has the opportunities to tie in with the primary school and tie in, to support the retail centre there as well, and that's been defined with green amenity and a green corridor that surrounds it as well, just to contain that level of development. We then moved to Ophir, and there's been a small extension. Oh, sorry, just stay with the same slide. If we look to Ophir in the south there's been a small extension of the heritage precinct, just to acknowledge that there are some parts of the town that weren't captured by the heritage precinct, and to protect that character. And then in terms of the respecting the Manahiri care river corridor, looking to revegetate that, supplement that with a trail network for good recreational opportunities in close proximity to the towns, and then linking Ophir to Omakau through some of those green corridors as well along the existing road corridors. Ed, do you want to talk to around some of the data there?
So this is the Stats NZ baseline that we then overlay a growth model to it, Omakau and Ophir. And you go to the next one in terms of the number of dwellings. It looks like quite a nominal amount of growth, 86 new homes. So what we have done is there's actually quite, between Stats NZ and Council's database, there's actually quite a big discrepancy. So what we've actually done, and this will need further work and I think because we've got these infrastructure issues, we won't be probably putting forward plan changes in the residential area for some time.
Not yet.
Yeah.
We can't, what we've been told is that the current infrastructure can service the existing zone stuff, but future, any additional zoning, we can't cope with it at the moment, but it will do. So we will still, we're working through what that might look like. It might be a deferred zone until such time as that happens, because we can't, we just can't put it in the infrastructure. Can't cope.
So we've got development contributions. Something to put it forward.
So what would the same percentage gain for Omakau and Ophir not be the same as that?
Because it actually has its own statistical area.
Land in this area able to be developed.
The Omakau and Ophir, which is an SA1, statistical area 1, which is quite an anomaly in the way that they've structured
Doesn't sound
areas.
Doesn't sound like government departments.
being that accurate or?
Having an anomalies.
So we have had a little bit of trouble stitching that back to the number of houses that are sitting in the rates database. So what we have done is we've taken 312 as our target number of homes, right? So we go to the next slide and you'll see that there's our target, 312. And we've provided again a lot of extra capacity, right? So that as we know, we've got some infrastructure issues with the wastewater treatment facility, and therefore, you know, it'll be some time before we need to nail this down properly. But I think the key message is that there's been ample provided for in the spatial plan as it stands.
I think also something to note about Manukau in particular is that there is a lot of land that's currently zoned residential that hasn't been utilised. So it's not like we don't have supply there, and I guess it's up to the landowner to decide when they think it's appropriate to do that. So there is land available in Manukau at the moment, and the other thing is that the subdivision, the new subdivision on the main street, that's set for many, many years. But in recent years, we've seen a significant uptake of all of those sections. So that might be the case. So we'll just keep a really close eye on what's going on there. But we do know that there is some there at the moment because of the not insignificant infrastructure challenges there. We just need to be a bit careful.
So I mean, totally understand the infrastructure side of things, and until that's fixed, we can't move ahead. So I totally get that. But that rural residential bit that you've got in the plan for Manukau, would that not be worth going into that low density residential based on the fact that it can't, by doing that, but it can't happen until the infrastructure's in? So it's a stage, like you say, it's a staged approach.
I think the next slide shows the staging of your.
Because I mean, I totally get, but that rather than having to go through another process again, if you had it all as this is what, and told the community this is what's going to happen, but until we have.
Yeah, that particular block reflects the current zoning.
Yeah, that's the current zone, rural
current
residential.
zoning, yeah.
The growth projections aren't really signalling that we need more lower density residential.
Yeah, the other thing is that it's cheaper in Untitled than it is in Alex or in, those outlying areas, and it is.
And I think that's why we need to keep a really close eye on it, because I'm really conscious of that too. It's only 10 minutes from Alexandra and does provide an opportunity for people.
And the conversation during the drop-ins was that there was pent-up demand. That's the message we kind of got, that plenty of people were willing to want to live there.
So that was, it's just that what's existing rural residential that would become that residential, but only when infrastructure can support it.
So
it would give people that, well, this is it, I don't,
that's the first chicken of the egg.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to put it, if you don't know the numbers, you're not going to go and put infrastructure into there.
Well, the reality is you can't do it until you've got the infrastructure.
You're probably getting down the track about the solutionising of stuff that happens after this plan's in place, so I don't know if it's really too productive today.
I guess that's a good point, Neil, because this is a high level guide. So when we get into actually doing it, we can do more investigation around that. And for example, we're already finding it with the Cromwell one, that there are some things that won't be exactly like the spatial plan for a whole variety of reasons. So we could certainly have a look at it, but we would have to talk to the landlord, I think.
There's only one thing for sure about the spatial plan.
It'll be changed.
Yes.
Is there, through you now, is there any thinking way ahead to, well, not that far ahead, to water reforms? If we've got 500 sections potentially already in a residential zone, is that going to get us ahead of any queues with the entity? So we better to overextend?
I think that's what we're thinking about now is we're thinking about when we're providing for it, but in a deferred way. So for example, when we end up in, if we end up in that situation, that we have as a community already defined our urban boundaries, and it's in the district plan, albeit it might be deferred until such time as the stage 1 or 2 or whatever is taken up, that's deferred, and it will actually create a clearer picture for the entity going forward, and it also gives us an opportunity to, I guess, control our own destiny in terms of the spatial plan, and also with the RM reforms that are coming, we're going to be dealing with regional spatial plans as well. We've been working with the Otago Regional Council staff on this as well. So if we define, then we are, I guess, hopefully indicating what our future looks like. So I think, yeah, it is something that we've been thinking about, is that because we could just do stage 1 and leave the other stages, but if we did stage 2 at the same time as preferred zones perhaps, then that's a way that we can say this is what our community looks like for the next 30 years.
I emphasise I made that number 500 up. That was just off the
No,
top.
but we have been thinking about that. It's a really good point to raise.
So I'm mindful of some time. You're not far away from being done here,
That's
so
the last slide.
that is the last slide. Right. So we have the discussion. Someone moved. We received the report, please. Martin, seconded. Tamer, all in favour? It's carried. Thank you. So yeah, further that point that Tim's raised, I think this does highlight that going forward, the new entity. Whatever they're going to be, whatever they look like, who knows. I think you made a good point, Anne, that they need to be seeing this, and it's probably, I would be suggesting that if we adopt this today, one of the first things that happens, I go straight to them now, to whatever boards and groups are out together saying, be aware, you've got some infrastructure requirements coming up if something happens and you happen to have some role in it going forward, because they're going to be swamped with this sort of stuff. We're not the only ones doing this sort of thing.
So at the moment, you are building a business case around water and wastewater, which will include this conversation and looking at the options of how to deliver those services.
I just hope the new entity's aware of what it's going to have to be faced with and doing.
Because this is basically the growth there, the growth actually happens. Demand's there, but the infrastructure's not there to meet the demand, so.
We won't be able to zone any further land because that will be holding you back.
Any other questions? Comments, observations, Tamer?
Yeah, just in a follow on from that, what Paula was saying about that amenity buffer along the terrace and through that Waikirikiri Creek, and what that would mean for private landowners, and just with that connection of greenways, whether the vision is that in 30 years time that would be an additional council reserve, or what that, if we're indicating something in a plan now, what that means when it's not land we hold.
Yeah, I think that the amenity buffer, when we set it, the original plans, it was the original, when the workshops happened and the community were involved with that, it was just a sort of an idea, that kind of backdrop. And so we've gone through and actually set with their GIS officer and use LiDAR to work out, it's that steep trip that runs that kind of backdrop right the way through. So we've taken the bottom and the top basically and just sort of followed it along in a logical way. So what we're envisaging, this is really high level, what we're thinking is that, and it's still subject to future land changes, so we need to be really clear about that, and it's most of it's in the rural area. So what we're envisaging is if there was people wanting to develop, that we might take the opportunity to get land for tracks and trails and things like that. But also to limit to an extent the amount of development in that rural area, build development in that area, and end up with that kind of creek going up the hill, and so you've got that green belt.
Noting that it's already
It's already
quite constrained,
physically constrained,
or within a natural hazard sort of risk area, which is Waikiri.
Tracy?
Just a question on that, just following on with that amenity buffer, do the people that live along there understand that, do you think? Or is this going to be potentially something that they, because look, and I know that a lot of people don't get involved within this, but are they going to suddenly find out that they can't do what they perhaps wanted to do down in the future?
This plan is very high level and aspirational. It's a direction of travel. It's nothing set in stone, and nothing can happen until we change something in the district there. We're going to change that, for example, we would be consulting. Hopefully some of them are aware. There was a few people that came into the drop-ins that we held where there was a buffer along there, and they didn't seem particularly concerned about it. But where there would be definitely further consultation if we were going to give effect to this in some kind of change in the plan. So until something, anything that's in here has no legal standing or effect until we, in terms of development opportunities, until we change the provisions of the district plan. And that requires a process of engagement and consultation, and we'll be coming to council for approval to change, notify plan changes and stuff like that. So there's quite a process to go through.
So the key thing about it is this is the aspirations of the community effectively.
Yes.
And then the proof of the pudding comes down to when you actually go and do the plan changes, and then people say, oh, did you really mean to do that?
Yeah.
Or is that really going to affect me like that? And that's well, under some future planning framework that we don't know what's going to look like just yet.
Yeah, and so we'll give more thought to what that looks like when we're actually in there and get more of those plan ones.
Another key thing to note about this is that the work that's been done in the background about the infrastructure and the stuff that we've done internally with, I'm sure Julie and her team to back all this up to say, well, I think even said making the business case for it. So whatever happens going forward, it can feed into that and it's ready to go.
Yeah, the infrastructure has been heavily involved.
Neil, just for my understanding, on the Alexandra map, which is on page 30 of the report, 33 of our agenda, the right-hand side of Dunstan Road, looking at that map, we have a small area of stage 1, then an area of stage 2, then we go back to an area of stage 3. I don't understand why it isn't just moving sort of along in a steady process where it would go stage 1 and then stage 1 and then stage 2. I'm obviously missing something.
So that's, as I recall, that's partly to do with some of the private plan changes that are either part of
that area.
Or
yeah, the area of stage 1 is the and change 16. You will recall that was brought to council and the large lot along there. So they're ready to go on that, and it's about, we've spoken to the infrastructure team around that. They can, as I understand it, service that, but we haven't. I mean, we could include it. The Fulton Hogan block is the industrial block there, and yeah.
Gotcha.
That's different. That's large lot too, and the block between Fulton Hogan and that block is is smaller.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, you've said that some discussions have been held with ORC around things like baying control. I just wondered what consideration have been given to air quality and specifically Alex and Fly, the intensification through there.
We haven't had anything specific raised by them. But we already have certain restrictions anyway, and the regional policy statement that's out at the moment proposes doing. They haven't indicated any concerns with this. We've been working with they've got an urban team now because they are going to be doing the regional spatial plans, and we haven't had any specific flags raised about this. In fact, they've encouraged defining our urban areas and keeping them in rather than spreading them out, and so they haven't raised any specific issues. One thing I will note is that we've got a hazard map in there. They're going to provide us with an updated one for the document. Excuse me. So they haven't raised any specific issues about the medium density or any of that. They're not just. We have been looking for
Any other questions?
Could I just shoot that thing change that thing?
Yes.
So that is included in
the stage 1. And they have done some infrastructure modelling, which is why that's happening.
Yeah. Not yet, no.
She's got something.
Yeah, Shirley's got a question. Shirley, you might want to unmute and just ask what you need to ask, please.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The only observation I'll make is that the financial considerations quite rightly point out that the spatial plan is being funded from the existing budgets, but I think it goes without saying that the true cost of this is going to come down the track. for its implementation. So you know, this is a lot of money that's been spent to put this in the front end, but actually the real costs will come later on. So and the process by which we follow that, we'll see what that's going to cost, and that'll have a big bearing on where we go, and probably be one of the bigger things that'll look at the change in priorities and timing, obviously, as well. Other questions?
Just the growth figures to me seem pretty big. And when and if do they get readjusted in the 10-year plan and so on? What, to my working out, it was 160 million invested into housing and these two places in the next 2 years per annum for 25 years. And some point is it'd be ideal if they are. But man alive, it's a whole lot of infrastructure. We're going to have to front foot forward thinking.
So we get different perspectives. Some people say we're undercut it, other people say we're overdoing it. So what we do know about growth projections is we'll always be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm struggling to see, that growth. You know, not only we're negatively geared. When I started here, we were negatively geared.
Well, that's right. So when in the, you know, around the late 1990s, we were going backwards here, and then that suddenly changed.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing is, I believe that curve, our growth, will continue to tick up exponentially. It won't just trickle along. So that's, well, look, I'm only guessing, but that's just from what I've been observing. So,
But I guess that's what it's for, isn't it? The plan is for us to start thinking this is what we're going to be looking at here,
the
and here.
popularity of this place is growing massively, right? So we have to think there's going to be hordes of people wanting to be here.
And even if this doesn't provide for it, like if this provides for 50 years worth of growth, it doesn't matter if it's planned for, you know? So we're actually saying that this is the logical way. If it slows down, we're okay. If it speeds up, we're okay.
You take the Cromwell example, Sue, where for all those years with that surplus that was there after the project stopped, the capability was there, and we all sat and thought, wow, it's going to be a bit of a desert for a long time. Pies and moorings sat there for I don't know how many years. The streetlights have been, and no one lived there, and now look at it. You know, so it's not quite built when they come, but actually it's pretty close to it.
Well,
We just don't know when.
I cited this morning about that new development in Clyde. You know, it's been on the market for 2 weeks and half. The sections are already on the market.
Exactly. So, you know, I think being a little bit aspirational is probably the right way to go about it. And there's
a lot of,
if there's 30 years or 50 years, at least you know where you're here.
Well, it could be 15 to 20.
well, that's the thing, and I think there's opportunities for us to dip into this. If things go completely mad and we can readjust.
There's people already in Cromwell that are saying quite publicly that the spatial plan that we've done is wrong, and it's 3 years old and needs to be redone.
Oh, I don't doubt it. And you look at the roading stuff and the Quarry Gorge and the bridges and the, you know, the 30-year plan and the roading that was done in 3 years.
Right, recommendation B. Lindley is busting a gut to move it. And Martin's going to say, I'll support my fellow Vincent Community Board member. Yes, right. We moved and seconded. Any more conversations? All in favour? Against? Carried. Just to close it out, and the team that have pulled this together, a lot of work's gone into it to make it happen and bring it to where it is. I will make the observation is that there'll be a lot of people out there that say this has been a long time coming, and they'll now be frustrated by the fact that it hasn't happened tomorrow, or some of it. But I think we all know at this table that is the hard work's been done, but the long game is now what we're now playing to take it forward to the next steps.
We are well underway with our residential review, as you're aware. So it's coming quite fast.
So we can look forward to some plan change, but I think the team deserve a vote of thanks for their efforts to bring it here. It's not been easy, it hasn't been plain sailing, but yeah, I think the hard work's still out there to come.
And also should always be the group of the candidate seats.
Oh, no, Louise. It goes without saying.
You go without saying, Louise.
Right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Right, we might be running a little bit behind time. Let's move to agenda item number 22.1.3, which is the Alexandra Airport Master Plan, page 30 of your agenda. And Tara, welcome to the table. Wait till we get rid of the other team. was gonna be, yeah.
It's a lot here.
Yep.
God.
Welcome, Tara. I just actually should just check, we're due for lunch at 12:30. We're happy to go.
My thinking at the moment, Neil, is we might get through your lot and see where we sit, but I suspect that'll take us, that'll do.
Yeah,
Before
okay,
Master Plan
cool.
Easter Sunday.
All right, just because it's lunchtime, we're not going to rush this through, all right? But I'm hungry.
Yes, just to consider adopting the Alexandria Airport Master Plan. The Master Plan will provide council with guidance for decision making and planning for future development and long-term protection of the equals of local aviation asset. Hopefully you remember back to the workshop we had before Christmas where our aviation consultant did quite a detailed summary of what's actually in the plan, what the plans are and the various activities that could be there in the future. Other than that, I'll take it as read, and the recommendation is to adopt the proposed master plan.
Thanks, Tara. So move we receive the report, please.
I'll do that.
Martin and Stu. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Questions, comments? Tracy?
Yeah, I guess it's just from the report. It says in there, it talks about threatened species, and then he talks about acutely threatened species. So it's a little bit confusing whether and the fact that he says it's unlikely to cause any problems. Is unlikely good enough given the climate that we live in now? The word unlikely, is it enough? And what we know about water and how you can get hauled over the cold pretty fast. So that was one of my questions.
If you look at the in the master plan, it's got a plan of where the threatened species are, and if you look at where the development is planned in the future, it doesn't really overlap. No.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not saying that I had it was just when you're talking about acutely threatened, it's quite serious.
Yes,
and it almost feels like it's been washed over.
So the acutely threatened species are definitely in places where there's no development plan. And we know exactly where they are. And in fact, there's a little patch where fenced off so that they can't be.
What you're saying is we're 100% confident that it's not going to come back and bite us.
Yes, we've taken that into consideration.
Okay. Okay, and the other thing with the vision that it just, the way it reads, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it only refers about tourism. It talks about tourism being really the only thing in relation to the airport, and I would have thought it should have been broader than just tourism. That was the vision that was done in conjunction with council staff and the people up there. So it reads very tourism based, and I was just wondering if there was a reason for why it was so.
It does also say innovation, research and training opportunities for aviation.
Yeah, it does, yes, the aviation. So, okay, I might be just picking. Okay, and the only other question I had is, has there been a request for larger planes to use the runway, or is it just something that we're future proofing?
Future proofing.
Thank you.
No A380s coming down.
Yep. I'll go on anyway.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Stephen.
Well, I'm pretty encouraged that we've got ahead because I can remember we had this discussion about maybe 6 years ago. And there was no confidence at all about what was going to happen at the airport. So Mike Kerr did a lot of work at the time to get us where we are today. So big ups to him. I'm sorry to say it's gone. But what I am wondering about is that I think at the time I moved that it had to be self-funding going forward. And are we still in that situation? It wasn't 100% clear. I think we should easily be, but I'm asking the question.
Yes, at the moment it's not completely moving towards that.
Could I?
We are?
Yeah.
once the.
Hang on, whoa. Nigel, Tamer, you, and I fit Shirley in somewhere along the line for that.
Yeah, I had a comment along the same lines as Stephen has raised, because I think that the airport master plan is a really good document, but I think it's deficient in the business area because while it's a considerable community asset, it's also a considerable business. And I don't think that's been covered in detail because obviously it's an outside report and a business plan and strategy has to come from within council. So as Steve has noted, we spent a lot of money in 2017-18 on upgrading infrastructure. We're budgeting another $900,000 within the next 2 years for further upgrading to allow another 20 to 30 hangars. We've got 104 hectares available for future development of aviation or for other commercial activities, airport related, not just tourism. Within the master plan, 72 hectares are already been designated into 4 zones. The 26 existing hangars, which are apartments as well as hangars, produce a rent roll of $170,000 annually. There's a waiting list for hangars of 30 people, so that we can project that income can be projected to double, and with rent reviews, properties will approach $500,000 over the next few years. We have financial planning in place relating to our capital budgets to income, but with the growth projected within the master plan, we need to reassess, I believe, the update that was done 5 or 6 years ago. So I support the adoption of the master plan, but wonder whether we should be adding a recommendation C, which funnily enough I've written out amendment, which would integrate a business plan and financial.
Can you email that to Rebecca, please, or you only got
I've got a copy here. Rebecca?
Here's one I've prepared earlier.
It doesn't mean turned into a packet now.
You just got a fly over, you reckon? Well, you've written, you might have read it out.
Yeah, I would like to see something added along the lines that a business and financial strategy be developed and that it be integrated into the airport master plan.
Right, can we just park that until we have the other discussion and we'll come back to that?
Yeah, I covered other comments on specific issues, but
yeah. So before we move on, Louise wants to make a comment about it first, I think.
Yes, I'd just like to say that the good points, the financial aspect to the airport, that's exactly right. A long time ago, we didn't anticipate that it would be so successful. And that's why we have developed this plan. It's really around the land use, and it serves 2 purposes. One is that we don't do anything there because there's such high demand. We don't do anything there that inhibits our ability to do something later. Like we don't put something in the wrong place. So we have a sense of where those activities will all fit in. They're all potential, and we don't know what they are now. So we don't have people lining up for flight schools and all of these different activities. So right now we don't know what will go there and what income generation there might be in the future. The other purpose is that once we've got a plan adopted, we then can incorporate it as a layer into our district plan, so that where there's activities we want to happen there, they don't need to go through unnecessary consents, or they may be very low level consents. So there's the spatial plan where things go and enabling that through the district plan. But yeah, we can certainly look at business opportunities and develop some sort of strategy at a later point.
Can I just, my belief is that the words say it, it's an airport master plan, and so that's a very significant document. And I think that the potential business opportunities, with taking Louise's points, needs a strategy and a clear direction for development, but also needs at a lesser level need the financial planning to see what we're spending against in our capital budgets, operating budgets against the rent roll and what we're providing. Because one of the other questions I've got is we're looking at a community of 50 to 60 people who have not just got hangars, but they've got living apartments up there. That's got implications on other levels, but on its merits, I think I would like to see something in the airport master plan that recognises the importance of the business side of that airport.
Yeah.
Not just, I take Louise's point that staff is a matter of course will develop. I think it needs a bigger recognition than.
Yep. Right, we'll talk about that some more when we come to your additional recommendation, I think. In the meantime, I'm going to go to Shirley with her question first. Sorry, I should get her, and she did come before Nigel, but I forgot. Shirley?
Thank you. Yes, I just want to support what Tracy was saying about plants, and totally agree with both Stephen and Nigel about the business and strategy and the resolution. And just want to also add that about the landing fees and have they been adjusted to reflect the extension and upgrade to the facilities. And how are the fees collected, and maybe we need to get modern and put in something like a tap and pay or something, because pretty sure that those landing fees are meant to be paid to help with the upgrades. And do we need to flag this for the annual plan when we do costs and charges? Because I think it went from $10 to $5 in the last plan, which seemed a bit weird to me. I might be wrong on that. Thank you.
Louise, Sarah, got a response?
They are currently $10, and we've just actually put in a system for counting the landings at the airport. Prior to that, we didn't really know exactly how many people had landed. So once we've sort of got some data from that, we will definitely be revisiting the landing fees. We've also been receiving some charter flights there that $100 a flight, so we've generated a little bit more income from that this year as well. We'll be reviewing.
Happy with that, Shirley?
Thank you, yes.
Emma.
The 30 odd people on the waiting list, I just wondered if you knew, are they all private people looking for a spot, or some of those commercial enterprises as well?
Yeah, they're mainly private, yes. Yes.
Sherry's up there.
Fly them straight out.
I think the income generation is more around the leases rather than the landing fees. At one point, I think that there was a discussion that they should be free to encourage more.
Martin's next.
The comment I was going to make was in relation to what this has been as a spatial planning document as opposed to business plan. This secures the space for the development, then, you know, and a business plan would be parallel to this as opposed to as well as this. That makes sense. You've got to have, you know, you've got to have this before you can put a business case around it.
Well, they're integral to each other.
Okay. No, I've got your worship, I thought. And if I haven't, no, I've got Stu, then I'm going to go to you.
I just had a quick.
No, I've got Stu,
oh, sorry.
I'm going to go to you.
Sorry, you, Stu. Oh, look, I think it's come a long, long way since it really started off. There's a lot of other things there's so much potential. We've got to make sure we tap it properly and open it up. And there's also the medical. We'll never talk about that. If we can land hospital planes, the technology, the fog, where they have to get the hospital down the road. And we get the military to come here with all those other things we never thought, and we've got to keep it as a tarsal. We've got to keep it as a tarsal runway. It's an airport, so we've got to keep it that way. So develop a plan that makes it work and get on with it.
Anybody else before I go to Nigel, because I'm going to have something I want to observe first, then I'm going to finish with Nigel so he can wrap it up and probably move it. So anyone else got anything else to bring? Because the only thing I'm going to make the observation is the way it's currently put together, the only implementation plan in the master plan is what's in the LTP for year 2. So I think further to what Nigel's saying, that talking about what is not there in 3, which is the business and financial strategy, I think it's also the rest of the implementation plan for the balance of the stuff that's in there, because the master plan has been presented as an external document, only talks about the budget, the hangars, doesn't talk about the timing or the business case for that matter, or the business plan for the rest of the development. So I think, Nigel, something for you to think about with what you want to add is that I think that's part of it as well going forward. We need an implementation plan for more than just the hangars and a timetable for that. And with that, I think then would come your business and financial strategy, because that's part of that to make it work. If that makes sense.
think that a lot of that would rely on demand, because the only reason we've had to go ahead with the hangars is because we've had 30 people required, but we haven't had a great inundation of commercial activity or use of bigger planes, etc. So it would come from demand, so it would be difficult to do an implementation plan based on pie in the sky type.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the rest of the land, because the other pockets, you know, the A, B, C, D, E, and whatever is intended to actually, is there something required to be done, or is it only going to be in response to demand?
Yes.
Right, which case I get that, and Nigel's observation becomes quite important.
One other point there is that we've been constrained by lack of water, so now the water will be there soon, so things will change. There must be people who have looked at that. The electricity was a bit of an issue as well, wasn't it?
Right. And sorry, if I can just, because the other question is septic tanks and reticulation of waste.
Yeah, which is covered in the master plan report as well.
Yeah, but it is. But I think it raises an issue that I think it probably needs to go back to the infrastructure team, because we're busy spending several zillions of dollars on reticulating waste in Clyde 10 minutes away, and busy developing another 30 apartments up at the airport, and using septic tanks is something not in alignment here. And the report suggests that a possible answer. So yeah, well, I'm just highlighting.
So the discussions are underway.
Yeah.
With the infrastructure team.
Yeah.
So that's it, right. What's been constraining the growth here is infrastructure, and so we're getting very close to it.
Just highlighting what the report's already outlined. Yeah.
So, just maybe we don't want to label what I was trying to point out, but at the moment, the recommendation is to adopt the master plan for the airport, and the only thing to be implemented as part of that master plan so far is the hangars.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like it's actually connected to the Vincent spatial plan.
Yeah.
You have a spatial document, and then you have some activity after that, like plan changes. So if you were to adopt the airport master plan, we could have a separate stream of work following that, which is your business. We can have a look at what that looks like.
Which I think is what Nigel's trying to pick up on, isn't it?
It is, but that master plan is the master document. And if you go back and look at the work Mike Kerr did 5, 6, 7 years ago, which was really a business development plan, what we're looking at today is the result of that. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to sort of reset that and do a new one, as Louise has indicated is planned to happen. But it's important enough to be part of the master plan, not just work as usual.
So I'm interested in Louise's response to what Nigel's proposing as recommendation C then. Because that works, then it makes it quite simple.
Well, I think my preference is that you keep them separate so that you're not constraining things going forward, although the constraining factor is infrastructure. If you have the Alex plan, that's fine. Because if we then put it into the district plan, it's a Schedule 1 process, which is very, very and slow to change, whereas at any point in time, for a report to council, you can change your direction in terms of your strategic direction for your business, or how you want to invest, or what you propose to happen there. This is purely spatially, it follows a template,
So,
template, and it's around what goes where.
So maybe instead of being integrated into the airport master plan, it should be to support the implementation of the airport master plan.
And sort of its
next
steps in terms
Does that do it, Nigel?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, right. So which is, I think we're all trying to get to that same place, I think. To support the implementation of the airport master plan. I think that's
nice.
Nigel, happy with that?
I'm happy.
Is that, and from a staff perspective, I think that gets the stuff that we've been talking around. It says master plan, tick. Now get on and develop the business financial strategy, which is the revamp of the work that was done a few years ago to support the implementation of that plan, because if you don't do that, you can't implement it.
Cool. I'm happy to move that.
Happy to move that?
Happy to second it.
Oh, goodness me. Thank you, Stephen. If you can have a crack at that one. So, sorry, just for old time's sake, because he wanted the credit for something he did way back when, or something 6 years ago. Any more questions? Comments, observations, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks. Thank you, Tara, for your hard work, and Louise, of course, too, for supporting Tara to go to deliver it. Are we having lunch now, or what are we doing? No, carry on.
It's not the east one, I'm not visiting, it's going to take a long time.
Right. Oh, this is good. Right. So let's move now to item number 2.1.4, page 87, Easter Sunday local shop trading policy. Alex, welcome.
Hi.
So the Easter shop trading policy is quite a procedural item under the 2016 amendment to the Act. Shops can trade on Easter Sunday if we have this policy in place, but the policy must be reviewed every 5 years and undergo the special consultative procedure. So this is an item asking about that process.
Right. Recommendations A, B and C. Well, you can't do that without telling me the names of the 3 elected members you're going to put on there.
Yes.
No, I'm going to suggest we do what we did last meeting where we actually give some other people a chance to do it.
Yeah, it's not specialised knowledge, I guess.
Yeah.
No, it's not. You're right. Yeah.
Good. It would be good to have one member of the hearings panel, perhaps, who's used to running the hearing. But
what did we do last? I'm just trying to give it the minutes.
It was last time it was myself, Tracy and Ian, and there were no submissions, so maybe we might like a trip.
So,
I'd like a rerun.
yeah, righto.
Tamer will have a rerun.
Tamer, Ian and Tracy, are the named councillors. Yep.
Yeah.
Two right again.
It's like an AGM. He's brave to stand against him and say no, isn't he?
fair enough.
Yeah. Goodness
You
me.
tell them.
Oh, absolutely, no problems at all. Right, so those councillors' names in the recommendations A, B and C, moved by
And also to clean the toilets.
moved by Martin, seconded by
That's good.
Cheryl. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks, Alex. Well done.
Name is telling them.
Guess what, Ian?
Hey, was it?
Just volunteered you for another role.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was Cheryl.
Yeah.
It was.
It was Cheryl.
Maybe that's what Tamer telling them.
Oh, yeah, I changed it.
Righto, thank you, Neil.
Am I done?
I believe you are. We're going to adjourn for lunch now, and we will be back at 1:15 sharp.
Sharp.
Which is just as that night.
Just gives you just under half an hour.
Any sharp? Nothing.
Well,